The luxury passenger ship Stellar Harmony moved through space like a silver needle threading through black fabric. Its sleek hull reflected starlight as it carried its precious cargo toward the Galactic Academy stations. Inside the ship, 4 alien students sat in the common area, their homework spread across floating HOLO-displays. Hannah adjusted her crystalline skin to catch more light from the ship's windows. Her 6 arms moved in perfect coordination as she worked on 3 different engineering problems at once. The Valerian girl was known throughout the academy as a genius. Her professors often said she could design quantum engines with her eyes closed. Today, she felt proud of her latest project, a theoretical improvement to standard ship drives that could increase efficiency by 2%. "Look at this," Yumi said, her electromagnetic sensors tingling as she pointed at her navigation charts. The Vexian girl's natural ability to feel electrical fields made her an excellent pilot student. "We are taking the long route through the void sector. The captain wants to avoid the asteroid fields near Kepler Station." Nari looked up from her medical textbooks, her large eyes shifting through different light spectrums. The Zephyrian student could see things others missed: heat signatures, radiation patterns, even emotional stress in living beings. Right now, she noticed something odd about the ship's energy readings, but she thought it was just her imagination. "I still cannot believe humans got into space," Rena said, her telepathic abilities picking up stray thoughts from the crew. The Corvin girl's mental powers let her communicate without words, but she enjoyed talking out loud with her friends. "My professor says they use metal tools and chemical rockets. How primitive can a species be?" Hannah laughed, a sound like wind chimes in her crystalline throat. "I heard they hit things with hammers to make them work." "Can you imagine? We have molecular assemblers and quantum computers, and they still use hammers." The 4 friends had been together for 2 years at the academy. They came from different worlds, different species, but they shared the same dream, to become officers in the galactic fleet. Each brought special skills from their homeworlds. Together, they thought they could solve any problem the universe threw at them. The ship's warning system started to beep. It was a soft sound at first, like a distant bird call. Then it got louder. The lights in the common area changed from warm white to yellow, then to orange. The girls looked at each other with growing worry. "Attention passengers," came the captain's voice over the ship's communication system. "We are experiencing minor technical difficulties. Please remain calm and stay in your assigned areas." Yumi's electromagnetic senses suddenly screamed with alarm. Every electrical system on the ship felt wrong, twisted, and chaotic. "This is not minor," she whispered, her face going pale. "Something is very wrong with the ship's power systems." Nari switched her vision to see energy patterns. What she saw made her gasp. The ship's quantum drive, the heart of their faster-than-light travel, was glowing with dangerous colors. Red meant heat, purple meant radiation, but the swirling mass of energy she saw was every color at once, and some colors that had no names. "The quantum matrix is failing," Hannah said, her 6 arms flying over her diagnostic tools. As an engineering student, she had access to the ship's technical systems. The readings made no sense. "This is impossible. The containment field is collapsing, but the safety systems should prevent that." The ship shuddered. It was a deep vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Emergency lights began flashing throughout the corridor. The 4 friends could hear running footsteps and worried voices from the crew quarters. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice returned, but now it was tight with stress. "We have suffered a critical failure in our main propulsion system. We are dropping out of faster-than-light travel immediately. Please prepare for emergency procedures." The ship lurched violently as it fell back into normal space. The stars outside the windows changed from streaks of light back to tiny dots. The friends grabbed onto their seats as gravity shifted and artificial systems struggled to compensate. Hada's diagnostic display showed readings that made her heart sink. The quantum drive was not just failing, it was destroying itself. The containment field that kept the artificial black hole stable was breaking apart. If it completely failed, the ship would be torn apart by gravitational forces no living thing could survive. "We need to send a distress signal," Rena said, her telepathic abilities picking up panic from the crew's minds. "The captain is trying to stay calm, but I can feel his fear. He thinks we might die out here." Yumi was already working on the communication systems. Her natural connection to electromagnetic fields let her boost the signal strength beyond normal limits. "I am broadcasting on all emergency frequencies," she said. "But we are in the void sector. There are not many ships out here." "The ships." Computer announced the bad news in a calm, electronic voice. "Quantum drive containment failure in progress. Estimated time to complete system collapse, 4 hours, 37 minutes. Recommendation, abandon ship." "Abandon ship?" Nari looked around wildly. "We are in the middle of nowhere. The escape pods do not have quantum drives. Even if we survive the launch, we would drift in space for years before anyone found us." Hannah worked frantically on her engineering console, trying to find a solution. Every simulation she ran showed the same result: complete failure. According to every textbook, every theory, every computer model, a collapsed quantum matrix could not be repaired in space. It required a full starbase with specialized equipment and weeks of careful work. "Wait," Yumi said suddenly, her sensors picking up something new. "I am getting a response to our distress call. There's a ship nearby." "What kind of ship?" Rena asked, hope creeping into her voice. Yumi frowned as she read the response. "It says, human freight hauler, Captain Taemin commanding." "They are changing course to help us." The four friends looked at each other in dismay. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as brave but primitive. They came from a deathworld, a planet so dangerous that surviving there made them nearly indestructible. But their technology was hundreds of years behind galactic standards. "A human ship?" Hannah said, her crystalline features showing doubt. "What can they possibly do? They do not even have proper quantum computers." "Maybe they can take us as passengers," Nari suggested hopefully. "Even if they cannot fix our ship, at least we would not die in space." The communication system crackled to life with a new voice, rough, practical, speaking accented galactic standard. "Stellar Harmony, this is Captain Taemin of the cargo ship Iron Mountain. We received your distress call. What is your situation?" Umi activated the reply system. "Captain Taemin, we have suffered quantum drive failure. Our containment matrix is collapsing. We need immediate evacuation." There was a pause, then how many people aboard? 47 passengers and crew, another pause. "We can take maybe 20 in our cargo bay. But before we start evacuating, I want my technician to look at your drive. Maybe we can fix it." Hannah nearly laughed out loud. "Fix it? With what? Hammers? And nettle wire?" But as she looked around at her friends, at the flashing emergency lights, at the countdown timer showing less than 4 hours remaining, she realized they had no choice. The human ship was their only hope, even if that hope seemed impossible. "Very well, Captain Taemin," Yumi transmitted. Permission granted to come aboard. As the human ship approached their crippled vessel, the 4 alien students prepared to meet their rescuers. None of them believed the humans could actually fix their quantum drive. But perhaps, they thought, they would at least live through this day to tell the story of how primitive deathworlders tried to save them with ancient tools and impossible determination. The docking tube connected the 2 ships with a soft thud that vibrated through the Stellar Harmony's hull. Hannah, Yumi, Nari, and Rena stood with several crew members in the main airlock, waiting to meet their would-be rescuers. The 4 students had read about humans in their xenobiology classes, but none had ever seen one in person. The airlock door slid open with a hiss of equalizing air pressure. Captain Taemin stepped through first, a stocky man with weathered skin and graying hair. His uniform was practical and worn, clearly designed for function rather than appearance. Behind him came another human who looked even more out of place on a luxury passenger liner. Duhan was tall and lean, with calloused hands and oil stains on his coveralls. He carried a battered metal toolbox that looked older than some of the students. The box was clearly handmade. welded together from salvaged parts and held shut with mechanical latches instead of electronic locks. "I am Captain Taman," the older human said in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "This is Duhayan, my chief technician. He will look at your quantum drive." Hannah stepped forward, her crystalline skin reflecting the corridor lights. As the senior engineering student, she felt responsible for briefing the humans on their impossible situation. "Captain, I appreciate your willingness to help, but I must explain the reality of our problem. The quantum containment matrix has suffered a cascade failure. The artificial singularity is destabilizing. This type of damage cannot be repaired without a full starbase facility." Duhayan said nothing. He simply nodded and looked around the corridor, his eyes taking in details that seemed unimportant to the aliens. He noticed the way the lights flickered slightly. He felt the subtle vibration in the deck plates under his feet. He even sniffed the air, as if he could smell the ship's problems. "Do you have the technical specifications for the drive system?" Duhayan asked. His voice was calm and practical, without any trace of the awe that most species felt when seeing advanced galactic technology for the first time. Yumi activated her portable display unit, showing a three-dimensional hologram of the ship's quantum drive. The complex mechanism floated in the air between them, its millions of components color-coded and labeled in precise detail. "Here is the complete schematic. As you can see, the containment field generators have failed in cascade. The quantum matrix is losing coherence at a rate of 3% per minute." Duhayan studied the hologram for a few moments, then closed it with a wave of his hand. "I need to see the actual drive, not the computer model." "But the schematic shows everything," Hannah protested. "Every component, every connection, every power flow. What more could you possibly need?" "Schematics show how things are supposed to work," Duhayan replied, already walking toward the engine section. "I need to see how they actually work." The group followed him through the ship's corridors. Nari watched the human technician with her enhanced vision, studying his heat signature and stress patterns. What she saw confused her. Most beings showed elevated stress when facing impossible problems. Duhayan's vital signs were completely steady, as if he was taking a casual walk instead of trying to prevent a disaster. They reached the engineering section, where the ship's quantum drive hummed behind layers of protective shielding. Warning. Lights bathed everything in red, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with dangerous energy. The ship's regular engineering crew stood around their control stations, looking helpless as their advanced computers displayed readings that made no sense. "The containment field is at 43% and falling," reported the chief engineer, a nervous Altarian with blue-tinted skin. "We have tried every standard repair protocol. Nothing works." Duhayan set down his ancient toolbox and opened it. The contents made the alien students exchange glances of disbelief. Instead of quantum manipulators and molecular assemblers, the box contained simple metal tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, wire cutters, and what appeared to be a handheld scanning device that looked like it had been built in someone's garage. "This is your advanced diagnostic equipment?" Hannah asked, trying to keep the skepticism out of her voice. "Advanced enough," Duhayan replied, picking up his scanner. The device was clearly human-made, with a small screen, physical buttons, and cables that connected to external sensors. Compared to the ship's sophisticated holographic displays and neural interfaces, it looked like a toy. Yumi watched in fascination as Duhayan connected his primitive scanner to the ship's main power grid. Her electromagnetic senses could feel the device working, but it operated on completely different principles than galactic technology. Instead of quantum computing and neural networks, it used simple electrical circuits and mechanical switches. "What is that supposed to tell you?" Rena asked, her telepathic abilities picking up confusion from the ship's crew. "Power flow patterns," Duhayan answered, studying the small screen. "Your computers think in quantum states, probability clouds, and wave functions. This just measures electrons moving through wires. Sometimes the simple answer is the right answer." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. The countdown display showed less than 3 hours remaining before complete system failure. The chief engineer wrung his hands as his instruments showed the containment field dropping to 38%. Duhayan ignored the panic around him and walked to the main drive housing. He pressed his ear against the metal casing and listened. The alien stared in amazement, listening to a quantum drive with his ears instead of using acoustic sensors and computer analysis. "The harmonics are off," he said, as if this explained. "Everything? Harmonics?" Hannah repeated. "This is not a musical instrument. It is a quantum singularity contained by precisely calibrated force fields. Everything vibrates," Duhayan replied, running his hands along the drive casing. "Even quantum fields have resonance frequencies. If the harmonics are wrong, the whole system becomes unstable." He pulled out what looked like a simple wrench and began removing access panels from the drive housing. The ship's crew watched in horror as he opened sections that required special authorization and safety protocols. Warning alarms began sounding as he exposed delicate internal components. "Stop!" the chief engineer shouted. "Those panels are sealed for safety reasons. Opening them could cause a radiation leak." Duhayan glanced at a small radiation detector clipped to his belt. "Levels are fine," he said, and continued working. Nari checked the ship's radiation monitors and was surprised to see that Duhayan was right. The human somehow knew exactly which panels were safe to open and which ones to avoid. His simple detector was actually more accurate than the ship's automated systems. "How did you know that?" she asked. "Experience," Duhayan replied, shining a flashlight into the drive housing. "I have worked on fusion reactors, antimatter engines, and quantum drives. They all follow the same basic principles, contain dangerous energy and convert it to useful power. The details change, but the fundamentals stay the same." Umi found herself impressed, despite her skepticism. The human's approach was completely different from everything she had learned at the academy. Instead of relying on computer models and theoretical calculations, he was using direct observation and practical knowledge. "Your scanner is detecting something our systems missed," she admitted, watching his primitive device display patterns that the ship's quantum computers had not identified. "Your systems are looking for quantum anomalies," Duhayan explained, tracing power cables with his handheld device. "They expect complex problems that require complex solutions. But sometimes the problem is simple: a loose connection, metal, fatigue, or improper calibration." As he worked, the 4 students began to realize that their assumptions about primitive technology might be wrong. Duhayan's tools were simple, but they worked. His methods were basic, but they were effective. And most importantly, he was finding problems that their advanced diagnostics had completely missed. The ship shuddered again, and the countdown timer showed 2 hours and 47 minutes remaining. Duhayan looked up from his work, his expression still calm and focused. "I found the problem," he said. "Now I need to fix it." The alien stared at him in amazement. In less than 30 minutes, using tools that belonged in a museum, the human technician had diagnosed a failure that their best computers could not understand. Maybe, just maybe, these primitive deathworlders knew something about engineering that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Duhayan crouched inside the quantum drive housing, his flashlight beam dancing across crystalline components and glowing conduits. The space was barely large enough for a human, and definitely not designed for maintenance while the system was active. The alien crew watched through the open access panel as he examined connections that their instruments said were perfect. "Here," he said, pointing to a section of power conduit that looked identical to all the others. "Microfractures in the metal. Your sensors cannot see them because they are too small, but they are causing electrical resistance. The quantum field fluctuates every time current passes through the damaged section." Hannah peered into the housing, her 6 arms allowing her to hold multiple diagnostic tools at once. Her equipment showed normal readings for that conduit. No damage, no irregularities, no problems of any kind. "I see nothing wrong with that component. Our quantum-level scanners would detect any structural flaws." "Your scanners look for quantum defects," Duhayan replied, running his fingers along the conduit surface. "This is old-fashioned metal fatigue. stress and vibration over time. The kind of wear that happens in the real world, not in computer simulations. Yumi extended her electromagnetic senses toward the conduit Duhayan had identified. At first, she felt nothing unusual. Then she concentrated harder, pushing her natural abilities beyond their normal range. There, a tiny fluctuation in the electrical field, so small that her conscious mind had filtered it out as background noise. "I can feel it," she whispered in amazement. "The current flow is not steady. There are micro-interruptions every few seconds." Nari switched her vision to see stress patterns in the metal. The conduit looked normal in visible light, but when she adjusted to see molecular vibrations, she gasped. The metal was riddled with hairline cracks too small for normal sensors to detect. "How did you know to look for that?" she asked. Duhayan shrugged as he pulled a strange tool from his kit. It looked like a hammer, but smaller and more precise. "I worked on underwater mining platforms before I came to space. Salt water, high pressure, constant vibration. Everything breaks down in ways the designers never expected. You learn to look for the simple problems first." The ship's chief engineer shook his head in confusion. "Even if you are correct about microfractures, that conduit cannot be replaced while the drive is active. We would need to shut down the quantum matrix completely, and once it fails, we cannot restart it without starbase facilities." "Who said anything about replacing it?" Duhayan asked. He positioned his small hammer at a specific point on the conduit and tapped it gently. The sound rang through the drive housing, a clear, musical note that seemed to harmonize with the quantum field's vibration. "Stop!" Hannah shouted. "You are hitting a quantum power conduit with a primitive tool. You could destabilize the entire matrix." But Yumi was watching the field's strength readings, and her eyes widened in surprise. "The fluctuations are decreasing. The electrical flow is becoming more stable." Duhayan tapped the conduit again, this time at a different spot. He was listening carefully to the sound each impact made, adjusting his technique based on the acoustic feedback. It was like watching someone tune a musical instrument, except the instrument was a device that contained forces powerful enough to destroy the ship. "This is impossible," the chief engineer muttered, staring at his instruments. "Percussive maintenance. On a quantum drive? It goes against every safety protocol." "Protocols are written by people who never crawled inside a broken machine," Duhayan replied, continuing his careful tapping. "Sometimes you have to feel what the machine is telling you instead of reading what the computer thinks it should be doing." Rena used her telepathic abilities to scan the thoughts of the ship's crew. The captain was terrified but hopeful. The engineers were fascinated despite their skepticism. The passengers were confused but grateful that someone was trying to help them, and Duhayan, his mind was completely focused on the task, with no fear or doubt clouding his judgment. "The containment field is stabilizing," reported one of the engineers, his voice filled with disbelief. "We are holding at 39% and no longer dropping." Duhayan nodded and moved to another section of the drive housing. This area required him to squeeze through a gap barely wide enough for his shoulders. The aliens watched in amazement as he contorted his body into positions that would be impossible for their species, reaching components that were supposedly accessible only to maintenance robots. "Humans are remarkably flexible," Nari observed, monitoring his vital signs. His heart rate and breathing remained steady even in that uncomfortable position. "We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day," Captain Taman said with pride. "Tight spaces, dangerous environments, impossible conditions. These are normal for us." Duhayan's voice came from deep inside the drive housing, muffled but clear. "Found another problem? The field generator alignment is off by 0.03 degrees. Not enough to trigger your safety systems, but enough to create instability under stress." "The alignment was checked just last week," Hannah protested. "Our calibration equipment is accurate to 0.001 degrees. Your equipment measures what the settings say they should be," Duhayan replied. "I am measuring what they actually are." He began making tiny adjustments to the field generators, using tools that looked like they had been made in a workshop rather than a factory. Each adjustment was followed by careful listening and observation. As if he was conducting a conversation with the machinery itself, the ship's quantum drive began to sound different. The deep humming that had been irregular and harsh became smoother and more harmonious. Even the non-technical passengers could hear the difference as the ship's various systems began working together, instead of fighting each other. Containment. Field strength is increasing, reported the chief engineer, his voice filled with wonder. 41% and rising. How is this possible? Yumi found herself studying Du Haiyan's methods with growing respect. Every move he made was deliberate and informed by experience. He was not just randomly hitting things with tools, he was performing precision adjustments based on sensory input that the ship's computers could not process. Your approach is completely different from what we learned at the academy, she admitted. We use mathematical models and computer simulations. You use direct observation and manual adjustments. Both methods have their place, Du Haiyan replied, emerging from the drive housing with oil stains on his coveralls. But when lives are at stake, I trust what I can see and touch more than what a computer tells me should be true. He opened another section of the drive housing and began examining the quantum matrix itself, the heart of the system where artificial space-time distortions created faster-than-light travel. This was the most dangerous part of the entire drive, normally accessible only when the system was completely shut down. Do not open that section, the chief engineer warned. The quantum radiation levels could be lethal. Du Haiyan checked his simple radiation detector and shook his head. Levels are actually lower than they should be. The matrix is not operating at full efficiency. He began tracing connections with his handheld scanner, looking for problems that the ship's sophisticated diagnostics had missed. There, he said, pointing to a component that looked perfect to alien eyes. Power coupling is loose. Probably worked itself free during normal operations. That coupling was installed at the factory, Hana said. It should not need adjustment for years. Should not and does not are different things, Du Haiyan replied, tightening the connection with a simple wrench. Vibration, thermal expansion, metal fatigue. The real world is harder on equipment than test laboratories. As he worked, the quantum matrix began operating more efficiently. The containment field strength climbed past 50% for the first time since the crisis began. The countdown timer, which had been steadily approaching zero, slowed its descent and then stopped entirely. The four alien students looked at each other in amazement. In less than 2 hours, using tools that their professors would have laughed at, the human technician had stabilized a quantum drive that their best computers said was beyond repair. How did you learn to do this? Nari asked, her medical training making her curious about human capabilities. Practice, Du Haiyan said simply. Fixing things that are not supposed to be fixable. Working in places that are not supposed to be safe. Solving problems that are not supposed to have solutions. He stood up and wiped his hands on a rag, looking satisfied but not surprised by his success. The drive will hold now, but you should get it properly serviced at the next starbase. I fixed the immediate problems, but there might be other issues developing. As the ship's normal lighting returned and the emergency alarms finally stopped sounding, the alien students realized they had witnessed something remarkable. The primitive Deathworlder had not just saved their lives, he had done it using methods that challenged everything they thought they knew about advanced technology. The Stellar Harmony's quantum drive was stable, but Du Haiyan was not finished. He studied the ship's technical displays with a frown, comparing the readings to notes he had written on a piece of actual paper, another primitive human habit that amazed the alien students. The containment field is holding, but it is not optimized, he announced. Your drive is running at about 70% efficiency. We can do better. The chief engineer looked confused. 70% is within normal operating parameters. The drive is functioning adequately for safe travel. Adequate is not good enough, Du Haiyan replied, already gathering tools from his kit. If we improve efficiency, we also improve stability. A well-tuned system is less likely to fail again. Hannah watched him prepare for what seemed like unnecessary work. The crisis is over. Why risk making changes to a working system? Because working and working well are different things, Du Hyan explained. Your quantum matrix is fighting itself instead of working in harmony. That creates stress, and stress leads to failures. He pointed to a section of the drive housing. That was difficult to reach, a narrow crawlspace between the quantum matrix and the ship's structural supports. I need to get to the secondary field generators. They are not aligned properly with the primary matrix. The ship's maintenance manual clearly stated that the secondary generators were accessible only during full system shutdown, using specialized robotic tools. The space was too small for most species and too dangerous for biological beings to enter while the drive was active. Du Hyan squeezed into the narrow opening without hesitation. His human flexibility allowed him to twist his body through gaps that would have stopped alien engineers. Yumi watched in fascination as he disappeared into spaces that were never meant for living beings. How can he fit in there? She asked Captain Taemin. Humans are built for survival, the captain replied with pride. Our ancestors crawled through caves to escape predators, climbed mountains to find food, squeezed through tight spaces to reach safety. We are made to adapt. From inside the cramped maintenance space, Du Hyan's voice came back muffled but clear. I can see the problem. The secondary generators are trying to operate at standard factory settings, but they need to be adjusted for this specific quantum matrix configuration. Each matrix is unique, Hannah called back. That is why the settings are standardized, to work with all possible variations. Standardized settings work adequately with most configurations, Du Hyan replied. But optimal settings work perfectly with specific configurations. The difference between adequate and perfect is the difference between surviving and thriving. He began making delicate adjustments to components that were barely visible even with his flashlight. The work required steady hands and precise movements in a space where one wrong move could disrupt the quantum field and destroy the ship. Nari monitored his vital signs through the ship's sensors, amazed by what she observed. Du Hyan's heart rate remained steady, his breathing was controlled, and his stress hormones showed no elevation despite working in conditions that would terrify most beings. His body is not responding to the danger, she reported. Most species would show fight or flight reactions in that environment. Humans learn to control fear, Captain Taemin explained. On our world, panic kills you. We train ourselves to think clearly under pressure. A soft chime from the ship's computer announced that the quantum efficiency was increasing. The drive was not just stable now, it was performing better than factory specifications. Efficiency at 75% and rising, reported the chief engineer, his voice filled with wonder. I have never seen readings this good. Du Hyan's work continued for another hour as he fine-tuned systems that the alien engineers had never thought to adjust. He approached each component like a craftsman, making tiny changes and listening for the subtle feedback that told him he was on the right track. Suddenly, warning alarms began sounding again. But these were different, not the panic-inducing alerts of system failure, but the careful warnings of atmospheric breach. A seal had failed somewhere in the drive housing, and air was venting into space. Evacuation protocol activated, announced the ship's computer. All personnel must exit the engineering section immediately. The alien crew began moving toward the exits, but Du Hyan remained in the cramped maintenance space. I can see the breach, he called out. It is small, but it is getting bigger. If we leave now, the pressure loss will damage the quantum matrix. You must evacuate, the chief engineer shouted. Exposure to vacuum is lethal. Not immediately, Du Hyan replied. Calmly? I have maybe 10 minutes before the air gets too thin to breathe. That should be enough time to patch the breach. Hannah was horrified. 10 minutes in decreasing atmospheric pressure? That is impossible. Your body will suffer decompression damage. But Captain Taemin was already pulling an emergency kit from the wall. Du Hyan, I am sending you a patch kit through the maintenance tube. Can you reach it? Got it, came the reply. The human technician was working with practiced efficiency. As if repairing hull breaches in near-vacuum conditions was routine maintenance, Yumi extended her electromagnetic senses to monitor the ship's systems. The atmospheric pressure in the engineering section was dropping rapidly, but Duhayan continued working without pause. How is he staying conscious? She wondered. Human physiology is remarkably robust, Nari observed, watching his vital signs. His blood can carry more oxygen than most species, and his organs can function at lower pressures. He is literally adapted for survival in hostile environments. The sound of Duhayan's work echoed through the ship metal tools on metal components. The hiss of sealing compound, the soft whistle of escaping air growing quieter as the breach was repaired. After what seemed like hours but was actually only 7 minutes, the atmospheric alarm stopped sounding. Breach sealed, Duhayan announced. Pressure is stabilizing. He emerged from the maintenance space looking tired but satisfied. His face was flushed from oxygen deprivation, and his hands shook slightly from the stress of working in near vacuum, but he was alive and unharmed. That was incredibly dangerous, Hana said, her crystalline features showing genuine concern for the humans' welfare. Everything worth doing involves some risk, Duhayan replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. The question is whether the risk is worth the reward. The ship's efficiency readings told the story of his success. The quantum drive was now operating at 87% efficiency, better than it had performed when it was new. The entire system hummed with smooth harmony, every component working in perfect coordination with every other. How is this possible? The chief engineer asked, staring at readings that exceeded every specification in the manual. Factory settings are designed for average conditions, Duhayan explained. But this is not an average ship, and these are not average circumstances. Every drive is unique, every installation is different. Optimal performance requires individual attention. He began packing his tools back into the ancient toolbox, each implement fitting into its designated place with the precision of long practice. Your drive will run smoothly now, but remember to have it properly serviced when you reach a starbase. I fixed the immediate problems and optimized the current configuration, but regular maintenance prevents future failures. Rena used her telepathic abilities to scan the thoughts of everyone present. The alien crew was amazed and grateful. The passengers were relieved and impressed. Captain Taman was proud of his technician's success and Duhayan himself. His thoughts were already moving on to the next problem, the next challenge, the next opportunity to make something work better than anyone thought possible. As the 4 students watched the human technician clean his tools and prepare to return to his own ship, they realized they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just technical skill, but a completely different approach to solving problems, one that combined scientific knowledge with practical experience, theoretical understanding with hands-on intuition. The primitive Deathworlder had not just saved their lives. He had shown them a new way of thinking about technology and engineering that their advanced education had never taught them. The Stellar Harmony's quantum drive hummed with perfect efficiency as Duhayan closed his toolbox for the final time. The ship that had been dying in space just hours earlier was now running better than it had since leaving the shipyard. But the real transformation was happening in the minds of the 4 alien students who had witnessed something impossible. Efficiency at 89% and holding steady, announced the chief engineer, his voice filled with awe. These are the best readings I have ever seen on any ship. Hannah stared at the diagnostic displays, her 6 arms trembling slightly as she processed what had happened. Every piece of engineering theory she had learned at the academy said that Duhayan's repairs should not have worked. Factory specifications were carefully calculated by teams of experts using quantum computers and advanced modeling. The idea that one technician with primitive tools could improve on that design seemed impossible. I do not understand, she admitted, her crystalline features reflecting the soft glow of the ship's displays. Your methods contradict everything we learned about quantum engineering. How can manual adjustments work better than computer calculations? Duhayan shouldered his toolbox and considered the question seriously. Computers are very good at solving problems they understand. but they can only work with the information they are given. Real machines have variables that no computer model includes, tiny manufacturing variations, where patterns, environmental effects, harmonic interactions between components. He gestured toward the quantum drive housing. Your computer sees the theoretical drive described in the technical specifications. I see the actual drive that exists in the real world. They are similar but not identical. Umi found herself nodding and understanding. Her electromagnetic abilities had taught her that reality was always more complex than theory suggested. You are saying that every machine is unique, even if they are built to the same specifications. Exactly, Duhayan replied. Two ships might have identical drives on paper, but one might need slightly different calibration because its hull vibrations are different, or because its power grid has a different harmonic frequency, or because its components aged in different ways. Nari had been monitoring the entire repair process with her enhanced vision, watching the subtle changes in energy patterns as Duhayan worked. Your tools measure things our instruments ignore. Your scanner detected metal fatigue that our quantum analyzers missed completely. Different tools see different problems, Duhayan agreed. Your instruments are designed to find complex quantum anomalies. Mine are designed to find simple mechanical failures. Both types of problems exist, but you need both types of tools to find them all. Captain Taemin stepped forward, pride evident in his weathered features. Duhayan learned his trade on Earth working in places where failure means death. Underwater mining platforms, zero-gravity construction sites, asteroid processing stations. When you cannot call for help and spare parts take months to arrive, you learn to make things work with whatever is available. The ship's chief engineer shook his head in amazement. But how did you know which adjustments to make? We have quantum computers that can model millions of possible configurations. You just listened to the machine and seemed to know exactly what it needed. Experience, Duhayan said simply. I have worked on hundreds of different drives, generators, and reactors. After a while, you start to recognize patterns. The way a bearing sounds when it is wearing out. The vibration frequency that means a coupling is loose. The harmonic that indicates field alignment problems. Rena used her telepathic abilities to probe deeper into Duhayan's thoughts, curious about how his mind worked. What she found surprised his thinking was not chaotic or primitive as she had expected. Instead, it was highly organized and systematic, but in a completely different way than alien minds typically worked. You think in patterns and relationships, she observed. Not in mathematical equations or logical structures, but in connections between causes and effects. Every machine tells a story, Duhayan explained. Where patterns tell you how forces flow through the structure. Sound tells you which components are under stress. Temperature tells you where energy is being wasted. If you know how to read the signs, machines will tell you exactly what is wrong with them. Hannah felt her understanding of engineering shifting as she listened. At the academy, she had learned to trust computers and mathematical models above all else. The idea of listening to a machine seemed primitive and unscientific, but she could not argue with the results. Duhayan's intuitive approach had succeeded, where her sophisticated instruments had failed. We are taught that advanced technology should replace human judgment, she said slowly. But you are saying that human judgment should guide advanced technology? Technology is a tool, Duhayan replied. A very powerful tool, but still just a tool. Tools work best when they are used by people who understand both their capabilities and their limitations. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement from the ship's bridge. Attention all passengers and crew. We have resumed course for Galactic Academy Station. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. The engineering department reports that all systems are operating at optimal efficiency. As the ship's normal routine resumed around them, the 4 students found themselves looking at their rescuer with new eyes. Duhayan was not the primitive savage they had expected. He was a craftsman who understood machines in ways their textbooks never described. Will you teach us? Yumi asked suddenly. I want to learn how to read machines the way you do. Duhayan smiled, the first expression of humor they had seen from him. Teaching takes time, and we will reach the station tomorrow. But I can show you some basics. He led them to a maintenance panel in the corridor and opened it to reveal the ship's power distribution network. Listen, he said, placing his hand on one of the main power conduits. What do you hear? The students focused their attention on the conduit. After a moment, Yumi frowned. There is a slight irregularity in the electromagnetic field. A tiny fluctuation every few seconds? Good, Du-Hyan said. Now what does that tell you? The power flow is not perfectly steady, Hannah reasoned. Something is causing small interruptions, which means? Nari studied the conduit with her enhanced vision, looking for stress patterns. There is a loose connection somewhere in the circuit. The resistance changes slightly as the connection vibrates. Exactly, Du-Hyan said with approval. Your instruments would eventually detect this problem, but only after it got much worse. By listening to what the machine is telling you now, you can fix it before it becomes dangerous. He spent the next hour teaching them basic diagnostic techniques that were not covered in any academy curriculum. How to feel vibrations that indicated bearing wear. How to recognize the smell of overheating electronics. How to use simple tools to make precise measurements that expensive instruments might miss. Captain Taemin watched the impromptu lesson with satisfaction. This is why humans belong in space, he said. We bring something to the galaxy that no other species has, the ability to make things work when they should not work, to find solutions when computers say no solution exists. As the lesson continued, the 4 students began to understand that they had learned more about real engineering in one day than in years of theoretical study. Du-Hyan had not just repaired their ship, he had opened their minds to a completely different way of thinking about technology and problem-solving. The primitive Deathworlder, they realized, was not primitive at all. He was highly advanced, just in ways that their sophisticated civilization had forgotten how to measure. 18 hours later, the Stellar Harmony docked at Galactic Academy Station with its quantum drive running smoother than it had since the day it was built. The 4 alien students stood in the observation deck, watching the human cargo ship. Iron Mountain prepared to depart for its next destination. Hannah pressed her crystalline hand against the window, her mind still processing everything she had witnessed. I have been thinking about what Professor Zeltran taught us in advanced quantum engineering, she said. He always said that mathematical precision was the highest form of intelligence. But Du-Hyan showed us something different. What do you mean? Yumi asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Mathematical precision tells you what should happen in ideal conditions, Hannah explained. But Du-Hyan's approach tells you what is actually happening in real conditions. Both types of knowledge are important, but we were only taught one of them. Nari had been unusually quiet during the journey to the station. As a medical student, she was trained to observe and diagnose, but Du-Hyan's methods had shown her new ways of seeing problems. He taught us that machines have symptoms, just like living patients. You can learn to read those symptoms if you know what to look for. The Academy teaches us to rely on instruments and computers, Rena observed, her telepathic abilities picking up the thoughtful mood of her friends. But Du-Hyan showed us that sometimes the most sophisticated tool is a trained mind and experienced hands. Through the observation window, they could see Du-Hyan and Captain Taemin loading cargo containers onto their ship. The human technician moved with the same calm efficiency he had shown during the crisis, treating routine work with the same careful attention he had given to their life-threatening emergency. Look at the way he works, Yumi pointed out. Every movement has purpose. He's not just moving containers, he is checking the loading balance, listening for mechanical problems, observing how the ship's systems respond to the changing weight distribution. He thinks like an engineer even when he is doing manual labor, Hannah agreed. For him, everything is connected. Every task is an opportunity to learn something about how machines work. The station's communication system chimed with an announcement. Attention students Hannah, Yumi, Nari, and Rena, please report to Dean Castron's office immediately. The 4 friends exchanged glances. Dean Castron was the head of the engineering college, a stern Altarian who demanded the highest standards from his students. Being summoned to his office was rarely good news. They made their way through the station's corridors, past laboratories and classrooms where other students worked on theoretical problems and computer simulations. Everything looked the same as it had when they left for their study trip, but somehow it felt different now. Dean Castron's office was a monument to galactic engineering achievement. The walls were covered with holographic displays showing the greatest technological marvels of the past 1,000 years: quantum cities, stellar manipulators, artificial worlds. The dean himself sat behind a desk made from a single piece of crystallized dark matter. "Sit down," Dean Castron said, his blue-tinted features showing no emotion. "I have received the technical report from the Stellar Harmony. According to the ship's chief engineer, a human technician repaired quantum drive damage that our best theoretical models said was impossible to fix." The students sat in uncomfortable silence, unsure how to respond. "Furthermore," the dean continued, "this human achieved efficiency levels that exceed manufacturer specifications by using what the report describes as primitive tools and intuitive methods. The chief engineer has recommended that the Academy study these techniques and consider incorporating them into our curriculum." Hannah found her voice first. "Dean Castron, we witnessed the entire repair process. Duhain's methods were unconventional, but they were based on deep understanding of engineering principles." "Unconventional," the dean repeated. "That is an interesting choice of words. The human ignored safety protocols, used unauthorized tools, and made modifications that are not documented in any technical manual. By every standard we teach here, his approach was completely wrong. But it worked," Yumi said quietly. "Yes," Dean Castron agreed. "It worked better than anything we could have accomplished with our conventional methods." "Which raises uncomfortable questions about what we are teaching and what we are not teaching." He activated a holographic display showing the stellar harmonies. Drive efficiency readings before and after Duhain's repairs. The improvement was dramatic and undeniable. "I have been contacted by the Galactic Engineering Council," the dean said. "They want to know how a single human with primitive tools achieved results that our best quantum engineers could not match. They are particularly interested in his diagnostic techniques and calibration methods." Nari leaned forward in her chair. "Dean Castron, Duhain told us that different problems require different approaches. He said that our advanced tools are excellent for finding quantum anomalies, but simple tools are better for finding mechanical failures. He also said that real machines are different from theoretical machines," Rena added. "Each one has unique characteristics that can only be discovered through direct observation and experience." Dean Castron was quiet for a long moment, considering their words. "For 300 years, this academy has taught that advanced automation and sophisticated modeling represent the pinnacle of engineering knowledge. The idea that primitive manual techniques could be superior is challenging to accept." "Maybe they are not superior," Hannah suggested carefully. "Maybe they are complementary. Duhain used both his simple tools and our sophisticated instruments. He combined his experience with our computer analysis. The best results came from using both approaches together." The dean's expression softened slightly. "You are suggesting that we should learn from human engineering methods rather than dismissing them as primitive?" "We are suggesting that we should learn from any methods that work," Yumi replied. "Human techniques helped us understand things about our own ship that we never knew before." Dean Castron stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Academy's research facilities. "The Galactic Engineering Council has approved a new program," he announced. "Exchange students will be sent to human technical colleges to study their engineering methods. They want to understand how Deathworld environments produce engineers who can solve problems that stump our best computers." He turned back to face the 4 students. "They have asked me to recommend candidates for this program. Students who have demonstrated that they can learn from unconventional sources and adapt to new ways of thinking." The implications were clear. Hannah felt her heart racing with excitement and nervousness. "You want us to study on Earth?" "Earth and other human colonies," the dean confirmed. You would spend a full academic year learning human engineering techniques, working with their tools, studying their problem-solving methods. It would be unlike anything any galactic student has ever experienced. What about our regular studies here? Nari asked. This would replace your regular studies, Dean Castron replied. The Council believes that understanding human engineering methods is more important than another year of conventional coursework. You would return to the Academy with knowledge that no other students possess. Yumi thought about Du-Hyen's calm confidence as he worked on seemingly impossible problems. When would we leave? Next month if you accept. The humans have agreed to take 4 exchange students. Captain Taemin has volunteered to provide transportation to Earth aboard his cargo ship. Rena smiled at the thought of seeing their rescuers. Again, what do you think, everyone? Are we ready to learn how to be Deathworld engineers? The 4 friends looked at each other, remembering the impossible repairs they had witnessed, the unconventional wisdom they had gained, and the completely new way of thinking about technology that Du-Hyen had shown them. Yes, Hannah said firmly. We want to learn. As they left Dean Castron's office, the students felt as if they were seeing the Academy with new eyes. The sophisticated laboratories and advanced computers were still impressive, but they no longer seemed like the only way to solve engineering problems. Through the station's windows, they could see the Iron Mountain departing for its next cargo run. Du-Hyen and Captain Taemin were returning to their lives among the stars, carrying with them the practical wisdom that had saved the stellar harmony. Soon, the 4 alien students would follow them into a new kind of education, one that would teach them not just what machines could do, but what determined engineers could accomplish when they combined knowledge with experience, theory with practice, and sophisticated tools with simple human ingenuity. The galaxy was about to discover that the primitive Deathworlders had more to teach than anyone had imagined.